how it's going to shape up for them as game number 1 is getting started. Method NA versus Ethical in our grand finals in King's Rest.
So first thing I see from Method NA side is the fact that they're running a 4 dwarf comp, where on the side of Ethical, it looks like they're only running 2 of those dwarves. I think Airy may be playing human?
Yes, I believe that is the best damage race for Alliance Hunters. So I think that is what's going on there.
Interesting. I think I saw Kev from Goosey Bad playing that as well a little bit earlier.
All right, and it looks like we have a cool pull coming out here from Ethical. I think I saw some of them in that hallway there. Were they getting those? Skylark down, though, and Chompy down right away.
Good night.
That's not what's supposed to happen there. This key is, of course, at 1 level higher than the rest of the tournament has been, but J.B goes down on the side of Method NA as well. Lighty's using all defensives to survive while they get that healer back up. Things are going really poorly on both sides of the map here. We have a battle res used on the side of Method NA, whereas a full wipe came out for Ethical as a result of that mishap there. And yeah, these plus 20 keys do not mess around. Plus 20 fortified the entire first boss room here, and those Shadow Bolt volleys are casting. They really need to make sure they interrupt all of those on the side of Method NA. Lighty kiting for his life here at 13% health as these bursting stacks start to accumulate.
Oh no! Please.
Those heat-seeking tornadoes coming after him.
No, he pops the shield wall. He's gonna be okay. Man, that is incredibly scary coming out of Lighty there.
And that was a 2 shield wall pull for Lighty due to the touch of the Everlasting Major popping there. Yeah, so Lighty is indeed playing that Touch of the Everlasting Major, which is a cheat death that did pop for him on that run. But it also reset his shield wall when it popped, so able to use that to its fullest, preventing what would have otherwise been a death. And
how many
pretty good there.
Stacks to those big boys, those champions have?
Oh, Lighty goes down. No stacks of bolstering. That is just the champions with their
enrage. Their personal
enrage.
Yeah. Not the bolstering. Whatever makes them big and bad.
They can soothe that with Lip, but Lip just is like, you know what? Tank it, Lighty.
No.
Yeah, he has his core hound out anyways, who I don't think has access to that ability. So they are going to be having to use a res here, but luckily it was not a full wipe. So they've saved a little bit of time as compared to Ethical, whose Shroud is down. So Ethical have decided instead to pull 4 animated Guardians with each other here before getting back into that boss room. Things have become very spicy very quickly in the grand finals here today.
Ethical is weakly no-levering this currently, I think. Taking the 4 Guardians, very similar to what we see in a live pull after their first
they're standing pretty close to that obelisk. I wonder, no, they're not going to activate that obelisk. I wonder how safe they were planning to go there, because you could make an argument for just activating obelisks and making that last boss fight reliable, 0 wipe potential boss.
It is fortified. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to be...
Still a plus 20, though, from Ethical, a team that's been practicing their 19s for the last weekend.
That is a really good point. Ethical now pulling 2 packs together, so a pretty substantial pull in regards to what teams normally play. Not exactly that big in comparison to what we just saw from Method NA. Method NA is still playing that double construct with the Golden Serpent. This is going to be an immense amount of tank damage for Lighty whenever those constructs do enrage. I believe they enrage sub 50%. Lip will be able to soothe one of those if he has a, not his Core Hound, but if he has the Spirit Beast out, he can remove one of the enrages at a time.
Yeah, or if he gets his bat out there, but he does have the Spirit Beast active right now, or Netherray even. Lighty, though, he's playing that Touch of the Everlasting Major, which means that while that is on cooldown, he's kind of missing out on that Lucid Major that Skylark has access to. Really cool that over the course of the last 2 weekends of the MDI, I believe we've seen 6 different Major Essences coming out on Protection Warriors. It's so cool to see these players experimenting and swapping between things based on the situation. And Lighty's choice of that Touch of the Everlasting, I think, saved that first pull from being a full wipe, as it delayed his death long enough for them to kill almost everything else off. But he is a little bit weaker until it becomes available once again.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we saw during Season 2, during Reaping Season. We saw most of the tanks actually run that one. Lighty, weird things are happening right now. Okay, so he is okay. Anyways, my point, very similar to Blansamdi's Bargain, the trinket that we saw during the Reaping Season that was utilized a lot by tanks. But so sometimes the tanks are really concerned about their survivability. They run Touch the Everlasting Major like Tratnus was saying.
Yeah, and then there's kind of Lucid, which is a mid-range survivability option, and then there's like offensive options like Strength of the Warden or Anima of Life and Death, or even Vision of Perfection, which is kind of mid-ground to that. And then there's also Conflict and Strife, which we've seen teams use when they want to kite a lot, especially against stuff like Necrotic.
I think I saw Suffer playing Formless Void. which is kind of weird.
I didn't see that. I know Ellesmere was playing Formless Void.
I saw one of the Prot Warrior tanks also playing Formless Void and stealing Iris.
That is wild. That's pretty cool. So yeah, there's really that's 7 different major essences then. Really exciting to see.
Counting with Count Dratnos.
Yep. That's a lot of different essences, Tunnels. So many.
Thank you.
They are pulling into the gauntlet room here, our Method NA, as Minions Azul come filtering in as J.B had gone to pull them along with some of the robot things.
So that's really good by Lip to actually use Binding Shot on all of those, because they do actually activate on death affixes. So they were binding them to try to get down those little mobs that spawn with King of Cool there. And then once that bursting stack went away, they decided then we're going to be able to deal with these Minions of Zul. Lighty is getting the suppression slams. Unfortunately, they're a little bit off sync, so that can be kind of hard to deal with sometimes, especially if you have them facing in opposing directions. But they'll probably be okay as long as Lighty's not just wheeling them around in sporadic manners, so it should be fine.
Really want to try and avoid covering the entire room with that. Of course, it only does damage initially. It leaves behind a more impressive animation after the fact, but that doesn't actually deal any damage. It's the small little animation that indicates it's about to fire.
Do you remember when that ability didn't have an animation on it at all?
I do remember that. Yes, that was back before anybody ever pulled these things because the ability didn't have an animation.
Yes, they were terrible. They actually made the Enrage suitable this season, which it used to not be, which is kind of weird that they changed.
And they buffed how much enemy forces you got from these guys, so they really added some incentive to pulling these enemies over the course of the expansion.
Yeah. On the side of Ethical, they will be down in Golden Serpent here in just a few moments. Method NA is halfway done with their Gauntlet Room, going to be downing those 2 constructs momentarily as well. Shakib drops
Fish Feast coming down.
Low, but yeah, the Fish Feast going to be able to make sure everybody is staying healthy.
Yeah, that's really, really nice of them to eat that Fish Feast and not make J.B heal it all up from them. Going in. That's
the Pally technique where I can't heal whenever I'm not in combat with mobs. Please eat this Fish Feast.
Yeah. So Method NA are 2 trash pulls of this gauntlet ahead of Ethical. Ethical has already killed those Awakened Guardians, so they don't need to go and send out anybody to go get those. So they might be a little bit faster in these first 2 trash pulls of the gauntlet, but it's probably a little bit less efficient than what Method NA were able to do. And of course, that full team wipe has still set them back by probably a minute and a half is what we're seeing. Actually, is that 2.5 minutes on the differential between the boss 1 death?
Yeah,
okay. Math with Dratnos. Coming here to you today.
So it's probably about 2 minutes if you have to factor in the constructs. Pretty efficient pull to be able to do it with all the trash, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be some time saved by having just additional priority damage on some of these mobs that come in.
Yeah, so Ethical's going to have to find some way to speed up the rest of their run, or they're going to need something to go wrong for Method NA, which is never something that you can rely on happening.
I think at this point you probably just hope that Method NA has a Keystone Masters debacle. If you guys do not know, Method NA played against Team Dratnos in Keystone Masters and had a very interesting match. So I think Ethical at this point should probably be hoping that they do something similar.
Yeah, that was we were only like 20 seconds behind them at the end of that thing, which should go to show you just how many mistakes were made by them.
As a point of reference, both teams one-chested the dungeon.
Hey man, we upgraded the Keystone. It wasn't depleted. That's what's important in these things. We've seen in previous MDIs, in fact, some King's Rests get depleted, so it's not the worst that's ever happened on broadcast.
Please do not hate on my friends.
Alright, so we have Method NA. They are pulling Samrak Beckoner of Chaos through this obelisk here. And that means that they're probably going to be doing 3 with King Dazar and doing like a meld across the bridge, or maybe they'll be activating 1 or both of those obelisks on the bridge later, making King Dazar a very safe experience. No battle reses available yet for Method NA, but one of them will be available soon. Ethical has managed to save both of their, or one of their reses and the other one that's about to come off cooldown momentarily.
Unfortunately, Ethical doesn't have a purge in their composition, so you do see Airy going to be MC'd for full duration there.
They do, but it's Airy.
Oh, good call. They do have a purge, but it's Airy. That's unfortunate for him. Do you think Method NA is going to play the constructs with Machimba like we've seen from a lot of teams, or do you think they're going to take it a little bit slower?
I believe that we will see that, yes. I believe that we're going to wait until these first 2 Entombs go out, and then they will be going right on into Machimba. So yeah, you can see they're moving over. They're opening the coffin, and Lighty, maybe not.
I mean, we've seen
there.
we've seen Ethical mess this up where they don't get the 2 constructs down quick enough, and they do their second cast of the Entomb on the players, and then at that point it is.
Yeah, especially on a +20, even if you've practiced it and you've got it barely working on a +19, +20 with those extra 10% on the health of the enemies can make that into something that is no longer doable or reliable. And it looks like Method NA opting for that reliability instead.
Exactly.
They are going to prove me wrong, and they are going to instead just do this trash and then do the boss.
Yeah, because they do in fact get those Entombs like you did see. And if they got the Entombs during Machemba, to be able to even get their players out, they would be spawning 1 mummy apiece. Those mummies are bad news. So
yeah, they do have so they do have their Bloodlust, or their Bloodlust just became available,
Yeah,
but it was
just
not
came
ready at the time. If they had it, maybe they would have considered doing that pull into boss, but without it, yeah, that kind of indicates that they're making pretty good time throughout this dungeon, having Bloodlust just come up now. They're pretty far in the dungeon to have Bloodlust just coming off cooldown.
do you think if you were Ethical, you'd take the constructs into the boss with Bloodlust then?
So Ethical has a couple different options here. The option 1 is, hey, we're behind. In order to catch up to Method NA, we need to make bigger and riskier pulls. Option 2 is, hey, we're behind. Let's hope that Method NA messes up, and we are going to put up a time that will otherwise lose to them.
Did you say
And
option A and option 2?
Option A and option 2, you heard it here.
Okay.
Yeah, those are 2 different options.
He's right.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. So that's the 2 different strategies from them. I don't know what is better. I think that it depends on what team you're up against, and
Sure.
it depends on how likely it is to work for you. You know, if you can take something that is maybe 50%, like if you can take something that has a 50% chance of wiping you, but will catch you back up, that's probably worth doing. If you can take something that has like a 20% chance of working or a 10% chance of working, maybe you're better off just hoping things go badly on the other side of the matchup.
Well, I think that even if they did pull this off, it wouldn't even catch them up. I think it's part of the problem. So they may be better off.
The risk
just,
versus reward here.
They may be
you're
better
paying
off just
a
playing
lot
their
of
initial strategy and just doing it normally, as opposed to trying to play something to catch them up.
Right, you'd have to be spending a lot of risk there in order to get a small amount of seconds that would not quite close that gap between the 2 teams. We'll be able to see, though, if they've been able to make up any time between Boss 1 and Boss 2 relative to Method NA. Of course, a 2-minute and 30-second discrepancy opened up there the first time. The clock is now starting as Method NA have down Machimba and are moving onto the bridge. Will Ethical be able to complete the same feat within the next 2.5 minutes? If so, then they are closing that gap.
I believe that the gap will remain exactly at 2.5 minutes, if I had to guess.
I think it might be a little bit smaller than that, but yeah, I think you're probably right here that they have yet to. They're not making enough progress, certainly, to have this thing closed by the time they get to King Bazaar. They're gonna need something to go right for them or wrong for Method NA.
I mean, this pull that Method NA is doing right here is very ambitious. There's a lot of mobs in here. They're not using their Bloodlust. They need to make sure that Lighty does not end up going down. It does look like he has that cheap death available. Okay.
It looks like it may have just... So Touch the Everlasting has 2 different debuffs that
Sure.
apply to you. There's the minor one and the major one. It looks like that thing is cooling down fast enough that it is just the minor.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
believe that he has the major still available. And that cheat death is extremely powerful.
It's hard for me to
does
say
reset the cooldown on shield wall as well.
because I've never seen the debuff before, so I don't know precisely how it works. I just know it's a cheat death.
Ooh, and the poison volley actually hits the entire raid there. J.B
Nice revival.
doesn't have revival available either, so it has to
okay.
dispel them all individually. A lot of damage coming out onto the team.
Oh, Lip. Okay, so Lip used his pet to be able to tank one of those Berserker Bleeds because Lighty had 3 stacks of the Berserker Bleed. Lip's pet does end up going down. You see him rezzing it right there. That is a very dangerous pull that normally on like on a 19 level, that pull would have been dead about the time that Lighty needed to start kiting. But once you do get it up to that 20 threshold, then the pack is still alive, and Lighty's like,
Yeah.
Now what do I do?
10% more health. 10% more health here adds more time than 10% to the trash pull because they're at the end of the pull, they're dealing less damage than they were at the start, right? So they slow down over the course of the pull as their cooldowns have expired. So it ends up being something like 15 or 20% longer that they're fighting those enemies.
I mean, that's
and that
why
can be
that's why
really
Fortified
bad,
and
yeah.
Tyrannical don't like really scale that well. Like 25% additional health on bosses does not only create 25% longer fights, like boss fights, because of how cooldowns end up functioning. In addition to that, because of how just phases on bosses work, the exact same thing goes with trash. Just the upgrade from a 19 to a 20, while it should just be 10%, 10% longer, sometimes the pull at the very end, your tank survivability, he just doesn't have 10% longer to be able to live, so he has to start kiting. Then the pull goes from taking 10% longer to 20% longer because now the pack is dispersed in a way that otherwise would not be.
All right, so we do see Ethical taking down Machimba. They are 10 seconds ahead of Method and A's boss 2 split, but they have much more than 10 seconds to make up between the two teams, so they are still in great danger here, as Method and A pretty much done with most of the really dangerous parts of the dungeon. The things ahead of them that are going to be trouble are Kula the Butcher right now, which they've just engaged, and then Shadow of Zul and the last boss will be the final challenges for them.
Yeah, Ethical did in fact use their Bloodlust on something a little bit earlier. Method and A still having that Bloodlust available.
Probably for the last boss at this point would be my guess.
Yeah, Ethical's definitely playing this slow and steady approach where...
Severing Axe comes out on Lip, but he does have that Dwarf Racial, which Airy does not have on the side of Ethical. So those 4 dwarves from Method and A, this is really the boss that race choice is aimed at.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to that, we did see Lighty getting a nice Berserker reset with that Dwarf Racial on that bleed on the trash pack in the hallway. Being Dwarf for this dungeon is just significantly superior to having Night Elf Racial.
Yeah, it is very, very strong to be able to remove those bleeds from all different sources throughout this dungeon. Not to mention random like poison effects and stuff that occur in other places.
You can also dispel stuff like Samrek Fear, I guess you used to be able to remove the slow from corruption, but you're no longer allowed to do that. But at some point you were.
Yeah, you used to work that way for sure. All right, so we are seeing Xanazal the Wise now up against Method and A. They're in this first totem phase. I'm not sure if they let the explosive one go off. It looks like they are just killing off all the totems. Some teams last weekend were just letting the explosive totem explode rather than commit any damage to it. Always looked a little scary, yeah, but you know, if you don't need to kill it, if there's no other damage source coming out at the same time. Problem with that is that then if somebody gets hit by an axe or a volcano, anything else really at the same time, a thing from beyond even.
Breathed on the wrong way. It gets touched by Nightball.
Yeah, a slight breeze. And it's over.
A slight breeze is a great way of describing it.
All right, Method and A now going on to the third of 3 bosses in this encounter, whereas Ethical are about to pull their first one, so they're not too
They
far
skip those
behind.
obelisks.
Yeah, they did skip the obelisks. Both sides skipped the obelisks, right?
Well, Method and A played one of them. They played.
Okay.
They played Voidweaver Malthier on the side of Method and A. Ethical skipped both of those obelisks and was like, all right, I guess we're just.
So this is how they're trying to make up some time. Yeah, that makes sense. They want to make sure that they're in range for, you know, to be able to win with a smaller mistake than like a full wipe at the end of the boss from Method and A.
Yeah, so they're at this point hoping that Method and A wipes to something stupid, and they are hoping that they are able to do 3 obelisks with the final boss.
Yeah, so they're setting themselves up for a difficult encounter there. On a plus 20 level, hard to imagine that they've had much time to practice that boss fight at this Keystone level, given that 15 minutes ago they were playing against a different team entirely in a different set of maps at a different Keystone level.
And they're still playing impressively, even though they had so they had that wipe at the very beginning of the Golden Serpent room. That is honestly probably to be expected. That pull is kind of wild. Especially on a 20 level. I don't know how I'd even be able to do that on live on a 20 level. Like, what kind of group of people that I would need to get that are insanely skilled enough to be able to do that, much less be able to do that without just a significant amount of practice.
Yeah, the challenging part for you is to just get those players to agree to play with you.
I agree with that, yeah. Thanks, Stratnus, for really putting me down. Method and A here, killing the Healing Tide Totem. You can actually let that Healing Tide Totem stay up, and as long as that previous one stays up, then the mob that casts it, I think it's like a Witch Doctor, won't cast another one, so you can just like leave it up and kite the mobs out of it. Method and A electing to just kill it off. It's pretty easy to swap too, especially on like a lower level like a 20, but it's not really a lower level anymore.
It does have quite a bit of health. Yeah, the question is whether it takes more time to pull away from it or to just kill it. The answer depends on where you're fighting these things and, you know, where it spawns exactly. But given all the mobs were that grouped up in that corner and there was still a caster among them, I like their decision to just go ahead and kill that totem.
Yeah, now we're going to have a mini boss, Shadow Zul, after we do this pack of trash here. Actually,
Yes, they're 93% on the enemy forces meter. I think they might be okay.
Because
they've got 2 awakened enemies and Shadow
Zul
Zul
gets
ahead of
4%.
them.
Yeah, Zul gets 4%, so they just need the awakened enemies and Zul. I don't think Shadow of Zul should be able to kill a Protection Warrior tank of Lighty's caliber on a 20, but I've seen weirder things occur before.
Lighty does have Touch of the Everlasting Major, which is actually extremely good against Shadow Zul, because
he
if it pops, he'll also then probably survive after that does proc. However, he may be intending to have that available for King Dazar, so maybe it'll be important for them to preserve that defensive cooldown. As you can see, there goes the minor part of Touch of the Everlasting for Lighty, but the major's still available. The minor is a 60-second cooldown, makes his next shield block longer. That's not going to do much of anything against Shadow Zul, whose damage is primarily magical and not blockable. That's part of why it just trucks Protection Warriors so hard.
Yeah, you see JB pumping Lighty, doing 100k HPS to him. Single target healing, by the way. Straight into the tank. And Lighty doing 60k to himself. Shadow of Zul means business, especially on a Fortified.
Yeah, that is not an enemy that messes around. Looks like Lighty is going to be able to preserve his Touch of the Everlasting Major, and his shield wall was not even used on this fight as it was on cooldown, so he will have access to 2 shield walls if needed on King Dazar. That is going to be very good news for Method NA. As they attempt to fight this boss with just 2 awakened enemies, Ethical are setting themselves up to fight it with 3.
JB actually oomed himself on
Yep.
Shadow Zul there.
That does not surprise me. Yeah, that is a boss fight where you really need to dump healing into the tank. He managed to sustain over 100,000 HPS during that encounter, but at no surprise, it cost him the entirety of his mana bar to do so.
Yeah, so now you see Method NA here popping Bloodlust, have Urgroth, Breaker of Heroes, and Blood of the Corruptor active. Blood of the Corruptor is pretty easy to deal with on Dazar. You just take him on this side, like the opposite side of which you normally see teams running on, just kite him out. Blood of the Corruptor will alternate whether or not it drops the pools on players, and then whether it drops the pool underneath the blob. It's pretty easy and pretty easy to telegraph how it's coming. And then Lip, you actually did see there, he popped the Survival of the Fittest in order to be able to get that turtle shield on top of his Core Hound pet. And then the Core Hound will then taunt Urgroth, Breaker of Heroes, making that Spirit Breaker cast go on the pet instead, allowing the pet to survive 1 hit. Honestly, just really good play by Method NA. I assume once this Blood of the Corruptor goes down, it's business as usual. Shouldn't be too dangerous, I don't think.
Yeah, and they're kiting themselves efficiently here to end up roughly where Tazala jumps out once King Dazar gets low enough, so they're going to be in great shape here to be able to do this fight without any unnecessary movement from one side of the room to the other.
On the side of Ethical, I mean, they're really not that far behind, considering the fact that they had a full death on their first pull of the dungeon, ending up having to play the 4 constructs by themselves, then took the Golden Serpent room in 2 separate parts as opposed to playing it all in one. There was a tragedy on Ethical side.
They needed to be catching up, and they weren't. Their boss 3 split is actually longer than Method NA's was, and Method NA did an obelisk in that split that Ethical did not do, so, it's a good run coming out from Ethical, but Method NA's had fewer wipes and looks like it was a faster run as well.
I think ultimately it was just a faster run. Unfortunately for the side of Ethical. I mean, dude, 20s are rough stuff, I will say, and Skylark getting immediately killed by the trash pack in the Golden Serpent room was a true testament of how hard it is.
Not a good start to the dungeon. No, that's not what you like to see. King Dazar is now without a mount, and the last 50% of this boss fight dramatically easier than that first 50% with those awakened enemies. All they're going to have to contend with are those spears falling from the ceiling soon.
Excuse me, King Dazar, please exit the vehicle immediately.
Ethical getting ready to pull this boss here. They, of course, need to continue playing as if Method NA are going to wipe here. They need to try their best, put up the best time that they can, but I don't think it's going to be enough here, as Method NA getting through the last little bit here of this fight.
Yeah, basically at this point, it's very challenging for Method NA to wipe. JB is sitting at, I don't know, like 85% mana. You would have to have multiple people get Goomba stomped by a Quaking Leap, and then one of them would have to beat JB.
Yeah. You'd have to take one of them into melee or something.
It would have to be a catastrophe. Yeah.
Like an early transcend back to melee before the Quaking Leap actually came out. Something like that would be required. None of that does happen though. Method NA.
Been there.
Yeah.
I actually have been there. That is not fun to do.
What does your tank say whenever you do that, Jack?
It's not like a common thing that's happened. It just, sometimes you transcend back and you know, you bring the Sand Queen back into melee with everybody. Or sometimes, you know, he just jumps up in the air. You have the King Dazar jump right up in the air and right back down on top of you. These things happen, okay? They didn't happen to him because they're rank 1 seed in the MDI and I'm on the casting desk. But very good win there by Method NA. Just nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy, and this is kind of what we've been sort of hoping for some of these 20-level dungeons, Zyra.
Yeah, it's really what you have to expect when you get into the 20-level keys. The strategies that you make and develop for 19s will work in 20, but there's a certain level of difficulty and a degree of danger that's added when you go up that one extra key level that these teams haven't really been able to prepare for since they've been so busy practicing at the 19 level for the rest of the tournament. And to see a 2-death run through where the only 2 deaths were from your tank at the start of the dungeon, where you're doing an already incredibly difficult pull on 19 and turning that into a 20, that's, you know, that's about as good as it gets, I think, when you go that one extra key level up.
I think so too. I mean, and that's one of the areas where it's just so ripe for early wipes, early mistakes, and issues compounding. And you know, you guys were mentioning it a ton, Dradnos, of just, hey, running with a little bit safer, cheap death, major essence can be extremely helpful for making sure people are going to be getting to the finish line and getting there safely, you know?
Yeah, King's Rest in particular is just full of these really, really unbelievably brutal moments where they're spaced out far enough that you can have that Touch of the Everlasting Major available for everyone. I love that choice. Coming out of Lighty in this map has really, really worked out well for them.
Oh, I heard he was running Touch of the Everlasting Major. Was that ever mentioned?
Yes, but it's important to note because as far as I remember, I haven't really seen that been used too frequently by a lot of teams. We've been talking a lot about like Lucid. I believe you guys in the last series are pointing out, I think it was Skylark who was running with Vision to Perfection, if I'm not mistaken. So it's interesting to start seeing these different type of major essences, seeing more use and seeing a bit more variety coming out as well. And we have the gear inspection function at mdi.gcd.tv. If anybody wants to start checking out the gear for any of the players throughout any of the series, it'll constantly be updated for everything you need. So, with bans coming in to Workshop and Underrot, it means we've got Atal coming up next, and Method NA is absolutely dominant. They reign supreme in this dungeon, Tettles.
Yeah, I mean...
Thank you, Tettles.
You guys were...
Now, is that right?
What the? Cut me off, Jack. Back to you,
Thanks,
Jack.
Tettles.
But anyways, yeah, as I was saying, it's like, I think that is to be expected, especially if you guys believe that Method NA is as far ahead of Ethical as you guys were saying in the pre-show, or the pre-match discussion. I think we're going to see, whenever we do go to this Atal'Dazar in this next match, how it really ends up being. The Atal'Dazar, we know that Ethical kites the Obelisk mobs. We know that Method NA just plays them straight up. We saw how close these two teams were. They got within a few seconds of both of their time trial times whenever it was on a 19 in that upper finals. So are they going to be able to translate that to 20? How close really is Atal'Dazar in terms of just like damage? Like, will that jump from a 19 to a 20 cause major problems? I guess it's going to be something that we're going to have to be watching out for.
Yeah, I think that kiting strategy from Ethical is going to scale better than Method NA's strategy into a plus 20 key level.
I think I agree with that. Yeah, because 3 obelisks with the Asthma is like really rough, especially on a 19, but like once you move it to a 20, then it's going to be even more terrible. But as long as everybody's able to live from the Soul Rend, then the kiting strategy is significantly better, right?
I don't really think...
Well, that's what I was...
I don't really think that it's that different, right? The initial damage from Soul Rend, sure, that's not going to one-shot you. The execution is pretty much the exact same. I think that the death potential on that particular pull is really going to be almost all on the tank, and if you're taking out the Spirit Breaker with your Hunter Pet, which we know that they like to run here, I think that it's just about the same as 19, just with a tiny bit of extra added health and damage. I don't think, the only way you're really going to die on that particular encounter on 20 is same thing, as you're going to be running into a spider, and if you're dying to that on 20, you're also dying to that on the 19, so I don't think it's going to be that much more difficult. I think we're just going to see them fighting the Awakened mobs for just a little bit longer.
Interesting. I mean, I think we've seen how dangerous they can be on 19, but if they're that well practiced on it, I'm curious if they're going to be able to survive it, because when you were mentioning the potential for ethical kiting, it sounds like it would be good, but I don't know if there's enough, leech or self-mitigation, for example. I think that they're going to have AMS almost every single Soul Rend, if AMS is still around 45 seconds or something along those lines. I believe that's around when we get every single Soul Rend, but if they start falling behind a little bit, or the extra damage that is dealt to players after Soul Rends are being killed, or as they're being killed, I don't know if they'd be able to do it fully without a healer, though, Dratnos.
Yeah, I mean, they have Death Strikes. DKs can just convert some of their damage to healing as needed through that mechanic.
Even furthers the deficit of, like, you don't have a healer around doing damage, and then your DPS are having to Death Strike as well and start compounding onto that problem.
That's definitely fair. I still think, though, that like whether that strategy works is kind of a binary thing that doesn't change with Keystone level, much more than, you know, fighting enemies, which is something that does scale up with key level.
Well, at what point do you think that it stops working, Keystone level-wise? Like,
I was going to say.
Like, because at some point you're going to have to require healing.
Yeah, like I think that it stops working at some point after fighting those enemies with Yasma stops working.
What is the breaking point for this? You think it's the tank survivability with because of the skewer on the tank?
Yeah,
his healing.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, eventually you have to look at like how much more survivable the tank's going to be, because, you know, he's not going to be able to get any sort of extra healing for himself just and being alone with the healer the entire time. So we'll see what these guys have in mind as our game is ready to go with Method NA up 1 over Ethical in Atal'Dazar in our grand finals.
And right away, we are seeing a difference here coming out from Method NA versus their 19 runs. They did not pop their Bloodlust before the gate went down. They're going to save it for a little bit here, as they know it's going to take them a little bit longer to reach that last boss, so they don't need to start that cooldown as early as possible.
That's a sick adaptation. Again, like we were talking about on the 19, Yoda's sitting in that snap spot, not allowing the Juggernauts to charge out of melee, where Ethical Chompy is standing on that spot to make sure that, again, no Juggernauts are going to charge and cast that Merciless Assault. Aerie ends up almost going down to that one Juggernaut's Merciless Assault cast. That is a big Colossus on the side of Ethical.
Oh!
Method NA is having some problems, though.
2 gamers down there, both of their Death Knights taking a death there. That is rough for Method NA, as they are desperately trying to kite this pack. This pack is all sub 10% health. That is the extra plus 20, 10% health there that we are seeing on those mobs. And they are still going to be able to activate this obelisk, so not too much of a time loss for them. They ended up losing the 10 seconds from the deaths, and call it about 10 seconds from that pull being a little bit scuffed. So they are by no means behind by a huge amount, but this is definitely not good news for Method NA, as they are now behind Ethical. Ethical going to snap Voidweaver Mouth here to this spot.
They are ahead in terms of trash count.
That is okay. That's fair. They pulled 9% more trash. So if that ends up meaning that they pull 1 fewer pack for the rest of the dungeon, then it's probably a wash, or they might even be slightly ahead as a result of that. Yeah, they didn't even adapt their pull at all down in size. They just did the exact same thing that they've been doing with 34% count instead of 25.
Yeah, and you and I cast this this matchup on this map previously, and we know that Ethical doesn't do 1 more pull than Method NA, but they have to take that middle pack with just a little bit slower because they're not able to take it straight into Razan. That's ultimately what the difference in that 9% does mean. It's not necessarily that it's going to mean just like 1 complete different pull. It's just going to be a little bit slower on pulling Razan.
Yeah, something that Ethical really has to make sure they do is that their route has to clear a spot for Chompy to kite later when he's got those awakened enemies. So they need to make sure that there's not going to be any trash in the way for him to run into. Method NA doesn't have that same constraint.
This pull in front of Priestess Alunza is actually super dangerous, especially on Teeming, because you do have that added Confessor inside of that pack. The Confessor will do a healing ward or a Bwonsamdi's Mantle cast. Being able to juggle and CC through those casts is fairly important. Both teams do that incredibly well. The pack gets blown up by both of each team's respective Death Knights. Not exactly the most dangerous thing, but it is something to think about in a Teeming environment. Can cause significant amounts of problems.
Both teams now have the boss at the same percent health here, but I believe, yeah, Linza's transfusing on the side of Ethical, and that is not queued up for a while for Method NA. Ethical, though, not able to actually kill her on her second transfusion. They're going to have to finish her off, whereas Method NA, I think, are going to be able to have her die just to that second transfusion. So much time made up here by Method NA. They should be killing this boss within a couple seconds of Ethical's time.
It's the difference between the Rogue and the Hunter right there. Rogue, not exactly the sickest for DPS this season, I will admit. Arrow told me directly, Rogue sucks, Hunter is the god for Atal'Dazar in DMs a little while back, and it's like, I definitely am able to see why. It's just, the misdirection makes snaps way easier than Tricks of the Trade. Both are good, though.
Watch this Hunter play here coming out from Yoda. So, oh no, Lip is just down. Oh, okay, they are gonna adapt their plan here. Oh no, Shiki falls to the ground, but they had changed their strategy here.
This is on purpose. They're supposed to jump down.
I think that I think that they have to adapt given that Lip died. I guess that they're changing how this is going to look entirely. Yoda dies as well here on this drop.
So these augurs aren't supposed to be casting, but this augur is literally spam casting because Lighty's not directly in melee of the mob.
Yeah, this is things have gone badly here for Method NA. They are going to adapt though. They're going to avoid pulling Razan like they normally would at this time. They are losing some time, though, as a result of this inefficiency compared to their usual strategy.
Something that's also interesting about the jump from a 19 to a 20 is that Razan's patrol was in a different spot, so that was kind of awkward for Yoda to look to try to snap Lighty to Razan using Misdirection.
Well, I think that they had changed the plan. As soon as Lip died there, they were no longer on that jump down, snap everything to Lighty plan.
I mean, the boss wasn't even in an okay spot to do it either. It's just there's just multiple reasons that it wouldn't have been fine. That's just one of them.
Yeah.
Ethical here, not having too many hitches there. There's a 20-second differential in terms of death in Ethical's favor. They are able to down the middle pack with that pretty large snap that they did. Now we know that Skylark will end up running and grabbing some trash mobs and jumping all the way down by himself with all of the mobs right on top of
the Razan patrol here actually looking good for them. Exactly where they wanted it to be. They are both teams at 67% on enemy forces, but Ethical are going to be earning some more as they are fighting Razan. Meanwhile, Yoda going to go grab one lonely Skyscreamer to join the other. Looks like two that are maybe in that pool, or just the one in the pool. So two total Skyscreamers joining Razan for Method NA. But Ethical will be exiting this boss fight a little bit later than Method NA, but with a little bit more count and with fewer deaths on the board. So 20 seconds will be added to Method NA's time at the end of the run.
Something that's also really useful inside of this dungeon with how you do some of the snaps is just the binding shot for the Saurids. Whenever you like drop down into Razan's pit, like with all of those small Saurids, if you do have access to a binding shot, it keeps the mobs grouped up for longer periods of time, allowing your DKs to kind of ramp on top of them and just blow them up immediately.
Yeah, things can get really bad if those swords jump in random directions, and now they're all spread out, and it takes longer to kill them, and they jump again. They do huge amounts of damage when they do jump. Razan going to be going down here on the side of Method NA. Pretty quickly dying for Ethical as well, though.
This is looking fairly promising for Ethical, especially since there is that 20 seconds of death differential. And there is also a 5% trash count advantage in the form of Ethical. They also have that middle pack cleared out, where Method NA we know is going to be pulling that middle pack. The middle pack is actually pretty costly in terms of time, but in a teaming setting, not exactly the most costly thing. It's pretty good just to be able to, in terms of like count efficiency. It's kind of hard to get count without going into the undead side of Atal'Dazar unless you want to pull a middle pack.
Generally, yeah, Teeming week in particular, it's so rough to find a full enemy forces bar without pulling that middle pack. It does require you to go on both the left and the right side. And you can see Yoda snapping a bunch of mobs here, including some that I think would have been snapped with Razan normally from them. They're making this pull nice and large.
Moves, baby.
Yeah, this is going to be rough, but they're, looks like, able to use that double Death Knight to melt most of the enemies here, and we were just left with those 3 mini-boss enemies from that middle patrol. Meanwhile, Ethical have slain Razan. They are mounted up, and they are getting ready to head over towards Volcanic, but first, they have a big trash pool. Skylark gets pre-life cocooned and is now running around, grabbing all the enemies. It's going to move up onto that snap spot, and snaps everything successfully over there. And if he can live here for these first 5 seconds of this pull, he should be in the clear.
That's how Prot Warrior always is. Like they're pretty liable to die on pull with this pack, but once they are able to start generating rage, get all of their blocks and their defensives rolling, last stand popped, then they're kind of chilling. But like the very, very beginning of it is very
the life cocoon is so useful. The pre-life cocoon, meaning that they get there at 100% health rather than at 30% health. That can really make all the difference. Meanwhile, Method NA, 93% on the trash count meter. They are hopping in to this obelisk, and I think they are done with all the trash except for the awakened enemies that they will be picking up the remaining count from 3 of those.
Ooh, Skylark gets stunned. This is scary. Oh, no. Okay, this is going to be okay. That was very dangerous there. Those mobs ended up stunning Skylark. He just stood there for a few moments without any defensives up.
Yeah, he's gonna get stunned maybe again as these two mobs sneak up on him from the patrol on the stairs. All right, they are not gonna open with the stun, luckily enough, though.
All right, he's chilling. He's chilling right there.
Yeah, he's gonna be fine. Method and A, meanwhile, they are killing off Urgroth Breaker of Heroes. That is something that Ethical does not have to worry about, as they will be kiting him later.
Yeah.
Well, it is something they're gonna have to worry about, but later.
Yeah,
they get to
exactly.
procrastinate on that one a little bit, so I do love this strategy.
You're a big
deeply
procrastinator.
relate to it. Yeah. I'll deal with those Awakened mobs later. I'm sure it'll work out.
The procrastination strategy, definitely of high value to most teams. Now Method and A and Ethical are going to start Volcall at a very similar point. Again, I keep harping on it. Method and A does have the 20 seconds of death differential not in their favor, so they're going to need to win the dungeon by more than 20 seconds. We've already seen the strategy from Ethical, what they're going to do on Yasma. It involves them not killing any of the Awakened mobs. Instead, they are just going to... Chompy's going to life cocoon himself, pump himself with healing, get healing threat on all the Awakened mobs, transcend out and take them very far. Volcall is still to be dealt with by both teams. I don't think either of us really expect Volcall to be troublesome.
Yeah, Volcall rarely... Oh, actually,
my
I see a
goodness.
totem at 1%
Method and
health
A?
for Method and A. Excuse me?
Monka?
That thing's gonna
Monkas?
heal back up to full,
Monkas?
right?
No!
There it is! Method and A have a reanimation totem, go back up to full, and will either of the others begin that reanimate cast? Because if they do, then this will be absolutely brutal for them. Ethical in great shape now as they get to advance to Volcall's second phase here, ahead of Method and A, and with a death timer in their advantage. As long as they can execute that strategy on the last boss that they have, they should be in position to take this to a Game 3 in our Grand Finals and take the first map off of a Method team in our entire MDI season so far.
How did that push so quickly? I don't think any. Okay, so like a lot of times whenever you see those totems push super quickly, it's somebody running Twilight Dev, and it looks like Lighty has tier 3 Twilight Dev on his offhand, on his shield right now. It must have been Twilight Dev, right?
Might have been just, you ever just proc 7 Breath of the Dying procs in a row?
I have chain proc Purification Protocol. I don't know about Breath of the Dying like that.
I don't know. These are possibilities. You ever forget to look at the totem's health and just keep DPSing? Because
I have been there.
Yeah.
That is definitely a relatable one where you just destroy the totem and then the next thing you look at it's at 0% health and reanimating. The other totems are at 30%. You're like, I made him a grave error.
You just hope the group doesn't notice and you just can DPS it down quickly enough again a second time to keep up with them. Not always realistic, though. Method and A are catching up on Volcall's health percentage, though. Volcall going to be dying for them. Again, really the power of... I can't even say the power of the Hunter, because the Rogue is the top damage on the side of Ethical. Not really sure how Method and A is just doing so much more DPS than Ethical here.
I don't know.
Smashing those buttons with more force and severity.
Yes, maybe.
They're re-entering Nyalotha here as they go back to the middle of the dungeon where they previously entered that obelisk. This skip is fast and reliable.
Oh, Ethical, this is going to be your make or break, my dudes. All right, so...
It all comes down to whether or not Chomp can successfully do this kite.
All right, let's set it up. Let's set it up for the viewers at home. Chompy is going to try to get healing threat on all of the Awakened mobs as quickly as possible. He's going to life cocoon himself, and then he's going to transcend out of the room. He's going to paralysis his soulbind. If he is able to make it out of the room alive with all of the Awakened mobs on him, then this is looking very, very favorable for Ethical. This is a high-risk, high-reward strategy. If it is not done well, then Ethical will probably wipe very quickly. The mobs also have a chance to teleport to Chompy due to snapping in Atal'Dazar, so... just definitely be on the lookout for that. Arrow was doing a really good job of tricksing some of those mobs to Chompy. It looks like Chompy is off to the races. Method in A, also on Yasma. But I think this is looking pretty solid for Ethical right here.
Yeah, Chompy's still alive. That's what we're looking to see. Has threat, so no awakened enemies are in this pool here. And Chompy is off on his own mission as the other 4 members of this team try and take down Yasma. Yasma at 65% for them. Method and Nate do have some of these awakened enemies with Yasma, but they are nearly dead. And once they do die, Method and Nate will have access to J.B's damage, whereas Ethical does not. Chompy really needs to make sure that he doesn't get hit by either of these mobs. There's no caster among them, so he just needs to... He also needs to make sure that he doesn't get too far from them, so he needs to group them up nicely so that they don't get far enough away to teleport to him.
Yep, because if they snap to him, he would almost immediately die, and then the mobs would immediately snap to Skylark, causing a full wipe. In addition to that, Method in A is going to have to kill Yasma 20 seconds ahead of when Ethical kills Yasma because of that death differential. So as long as Chompy is able to stay alive, this is looking like a secure win for Ethical right here with a deathless run in Atal'Dazar.
Yeah, 40% on Yasma for Ethical, 60% for Method NA. They have also dealt with those Awakened enemies, so they'll be making up some time with the presence of J.B, but not enough to overcome that death differential, almost certainly. It's all going to be about whether or not Chompy can do this run here.
I believe he queued up the Benny Hill theme track. He's running around, just making sure that he continues.
Skylark also needs to not die, though. I see a spider popped on the ground there, and this would be a tragic way for it all to end for Ethical.
Okay. He pops his last stand, so now he's kind of chilling on health. Last stand, I think, gives 35% health and increases his max health by 35%.
And Chompy does a U-turn in his path here to make sure that he doesn't get cut off by Urgroth. Of course, Urgroth has a bit of a different speed than the other ones due to standing and casting that Dark Fury so often.
Dude, this is... Okay, whenever I was tweeting at Zamak about kiting these mobs, I now understand why it's so scary, because they actually...
This is it, though. This is... Ethical takes the map off of Method NA. That's going to be 1-1, and we are going to the Motherload for a game 3.
What in the world?
What is happening, dude?
Ethical pulling off the big kite strategies on the 20. And you do Atal'Dazar enforcing that third game. And, like you guys mentioned, they're taking the first game that we've seen off of a Method team this entire tournament. The past 2 weeks here is ironic.
What are we watching, man? Like, what's going on?
Dude, you guys did not believe that the top 4 teams were as close to Method NA. Look at this. Look at this match. This is why I was a believer.
All right, prepare to see, though, Motherload, which I believe Method NA has prepared, and Ethical I don't think has had the opportunity to.
That's right. Well, Tettles just feels the vindication now that a team is finally doing the kite strat and Atal'Dazar. He's been talking about it. He's been spreading the good word for weeks now. And, how does it feel having everything come together?
It feels pretty good. I feel like Ethical's probably going to lose this Motherload very swiftly, but it was the first map that we have seen taken off of Method NA, though.
It is. And it really goes to show how well these guys have been able to adapt to 20s, because previously on the 19s, nobody was really able to stand up to Method NA in Atal'Dazar as well, Dratnos.
Yeah, Atal'Dazar has been Method NA's best map so far, but upgrading the Keystone level to 20 really threw a wrench in their plans. They started to have these uncharacteristic deaths that caused them to have to readjust their pathing throughout the dungeon. So that really means that anybody could win, even in the Motherload here, even where we think Method NA has probably spent a little bit more time than Ethical. That's not going to be enough necessarily to guarantee a win in this plus 20 level key.
Well, that's the thing, is we haven't seen anybody playing Motherload. They'd get 3, maybe 4 hours, ironic, something along those lines, to just practice, as well as whatever they did last night or early this morning.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen a Motherload all weekend. That's the important thing. That every single time it comes up, it's been banned. And we also know that Ethical is one of the teams that really hasn't had too much time to practice all the dungeons. They don't have a very strong baseline in some of the dungeons like we saw in Siege of Browse earlier. So it's a really big play from Method NA to probably spend these 3 or 4 hours they've had while Ethical is kind of drudging along in the lower bracket to pick one of these dungeons that they know people haven't been playing or practicing, practice it on 20, and leave it unbanned in this final match. If Method NA doesn't win this map, then yeah, you know what? I'll go on a limb and agree with Tettles and say that Ethical is up there with Method NA, but I just don't think that's going to happen here.
That would be an absolute massive... it'd be a manifesto that the Oceanic team is ready and it is at that top level caliber. I mean, think about it, right? This is a dungeon that they have probably not that much practice in whatsoever, and they on the side of Ethical have come in with a confidence into these plus 20 dungeons that honestly I wasn't expecting to see. I thought it would be much more advantageous to Method NA, and feels good to be proven wrong. I don't know about you, Tettles.
I mean, it also, considering the fact that we didn't see any OCE teams in the Asian Cup, the Asian and OCE Cups last season, at this caliber, the fact that we do have Ethical playing at this top tier level is fairly refreshing, I must admit.
That's right. I mean, it's nice to be able to see that variety. They're on the other side of the world, and they're playing at inopportune times. They're not playing at their usual gamer hours for them. So I think this really goes to show how well this Oceanic team has been performing, and being able to have very tight competition in the top 4 that we've seen throughout all of today, Dranos, has been an absolute treat.
Yeah, this has been really good matches between all the teams that we've seen in this top 4. All 4 of these top seeded teams have been taking games off each other now. Had it been at least very close. So to see Method NA really challenged here in the finals, and they could very well lose here in this Motherload. This would be very, very cool to watch.
Could be, yeah.
It's necro explosive. Honestly, anything could happen.
Yeah, explosive. It always humbles those of us who make predictions when these affixes are active in a dungeon.
Well, I remember, I mean, speaking of some of our predictions beforehand, I was really concerned about the kiting strat to begin with because of how much damage was going to be lost on account of the healer not being there and, you know, the other DPS having to actually weave in a lot of death strikes and everything like that. But you were right, Dranos, it didn't impact them to that point.
Yeah, you just, as a healer, you have this mistaken belief that your damage matters, but it does not.
Oh, that hurts.
Dranos putting somebody else that's not me on blast. Yes, sir.
Oh, Teddle's about to jump in on the train. Oh, I deserved it, man. But the gushing wounds, all right? Just let me be carried by gushing wounds. 5-6 traits worth. I'm sure it'll be perfect. It'll be perfect. Now, what are some of our predictions for some of these early polls and early attempts that are going to be going on throughout Motherload? This affix combination in particular is ridiculously nasty, Zyro.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that we see out of Motherload almost all the time is these massive pulls involving lots of the big robots up here at the start, and they can't really do that because both of these affixes kind of counteract that. Of course, the more you pull with explosive, the harder it is to keep that under control, and then Necrotic makes it so that your tank is pretty much infinitely kiting the entire time as well. So I'm interested to see if they're going to be able to just go with that original strategy here, because if they are able to pull that off, it'd be pretty impressive.
I think Hunter is going to be exceptionally strong in this matchup. In addition to that, I think that they're going to pull as few laborers as possible too. The laborers are the small boys that have a lot of mismatched health. They can stack up Necrotic really quickly on your tank, and I think that would end up causing some problems at the beginning. I wonder if any team is going to take the first obelisk into the coin-operated crowd pummeler's room and then start working their way back.
Yes, that sets up a nice graveyard for them, and it takes care of one of those awakened enemies nice and early. So that there's definitely some advantages to that. Anything that is maybe a little bit slower on the top end of the strategy, but more reliable, probably worth doing in this dungeon, I'd say.
How many obelisks do you think are actually going to be pulled in with the boss?
I think 2.
2? Yeah, two seems like a safe bet.
That dungeon is really hard to play a lot of obelisks with. Yeah, 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I was going to say 1, but since these guys are saying 2, I think I have to go with 2.
You don't. Whoa, just wait to be a conformist there. Stick to your gut.
Yeah, come on,
I think it's going to be 1.
Right.
I think it's going to be Urgroth Breaker. Actually, no, I don't believe it'll be him. I believe they're going to play 1 though.
Is that your 95%?
Absolutely not. I have no faith in that prediction.
If it's going to be 1, it'll probably be the Tank Buster, right? That or Malthair, one of those two.
Okay, so the Tank Buster is really easy to
the Tank
play.
Buster?
No. He's actually really easy to play with the final boss because the Gatling gun lines up perfectly with the Dark Fury cast every single time.
Sure, but wouldn't you want to be able to have a good position for tanking the last boss that you wouldn't really have to be running all over the place? So if you're in one of the safe zones, you don't want to have to run out for any of the Dark Fury casts?
Well, you're gonna move him off of the boss, but yeah, that would be ideal, I'm sure, right? Like having 100% uptime is obviously ideal for melee.
And then again, the other thing is, well, the Dark Fury cast is not going to one-shot you as a DPS player, and everything else in that fight outside of the missile is dodgeable damage, right? So if it's going to go on if the missile's going to go on your Hunter every single time, melee players can just eat the Dark Fury to the face. It's not going to kill them.
There's also, if there are going to be Hunters present in this match, I believe that they're going to use the Hunter pet to taunt the Tank Buster anyway. So you're kind of chilling with the Tank Buster.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm interested in seeing it. I mean, the way I was kind of thinking of it is if there's going to be an intermission where you're not going to be doing anything to the boss, trying to just be able to find something to be able to cleave down while you're just tunneling the boss and then just kill it off during the intermission or something like that as you're killing off the rest of the ads.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense as well. I think that something like the Spider, for instance, is really easy to fight with this last boss because there's nothing to interrupt there, so you just, assign a kick order to that thing and it's handled completely, so I'd like to see something like that at least from both these teams. The Blob in particular, pretty dangerous.
Yeah, not the Blob.
Yeah.
That's the one you actually end up using for
the
skips.
Blob and the Fear. Dude, the Fear getting like Fury you off to the side, you just get nailed by the Boomba bots. That's never happened to me, but definitely has happened to me.
I feel like it has happened
out
to
of the
you.
arena.
It definitely has happened to me. It's a terrible mistake to pull the Fear guy with the boss.
Yes. Mistweaver, like revival or not gonna happen. on that one. But we are waiting just for Ethical to be set. We're waiting for all the teams to get ready before we wrap up our grand finals, as it's now 1-1 between Method NA and Ethical. And this has also been the rematch as well. Method NA quickly dispatched Ethical into the lower bracket after the upper finals game, and they had to fight their way back up. And at this point, the teams are about as set as they're going to be to decide who is going to be the winner on this one. And it also shows a bit of humanity as well, Tettles, from a Method NA team that we thought couldn't be beat.
Do you think Ethical's making an MDT right now?
Oh my god! Wow!
I was joking. I was being
entirely
serious.
possible. It's
I was
entirely
not
possible.
joking.
Are they asking for one? They're getting one ready?
Maybe.
So what areas would you be avoid besides the usual areas? You said you'd be dodging, for example.
I would dodge the small guys.
Yeah, the laborers.
The laborers.
That makes a lot
yeah.
of sense.
Because
Those are just necrotic stacks and explosive spawners, and that's all they do.
How many thugs? How many thugs are you dealing with?
I don't know. You can pull as many thugs as you really want. I think. I mean, they're kind of annoying, but like.
Well, I remember last season, for example, we saw a lot of double unholy in this dungeon, and even some healers would just dip out for a bit before the pull even started. They would just stay out of the way as all the thugs got grabbed in. Both unholy DKs would pop, Icebound Fortitude, not get stunned, and just try to blast everything down before the healer came in. So that's what's got me curious, especially since we're on Fortified.
I strongly suspect that there will not be a 6 thug pull. I believe that 3 or 4 is probably the maximum.
Okay. Well, if you binding shot one of the thugs and it doesn't activate before they charge, and it tries to like charge the hunter, it still stops it, right?
I think that the damage gets done at the start of the charge, but I can't prove it.
Okay.
I could be wrong, actually.
I mean, I guess we're going to be finding out pretty
Yeah.
quickly as well.
No, it's at the end of the charge, but I don't know
you're
how
right,
binding
actually, 'cause-
shot works. It's definitely at the end of the charge, but I don't know.
Because you have time to react with parry and stuff.
The,
yeah,
the
as it
stun
starts coming
is
at you.
immediate.
Yeah.
But the damage is not.
Well, we'll maybe be able to have the
Let's see.
opportunity to see. Yeah.
All right. Game number 3, the deciding match between Method NA and Ethical, is kicking off right now in the Motherload.
All right, we are seeing Method NA getting started with a Shroud, as they do have a rogue in their group. Ethical does not have a rogue, so their explosive killer is going to be Arrow on that Demon Hunter.
I mean,
Ethical
both
playing
of the
those
beast-
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, Beastmaster Hunters can do it as well, but Arrow's going to be, I think, the primary explosive killer for them.
Yeah, I think
Method
I
NA.
agree. So right
Very
here,
much it's going to be Yoda doing it. Yeah.
something that's also important to note is that both tanks are playing that dwarf racial to be able to reset Necrotic. So I suspect that they're going to set up. I suspect that both teams will end up setting up elaborate awakened portal tunnels just to be able to move freely through the dungeon, since neither team is running a full 5 Night Elf / Vanish / Feign Death comp.
Yeah, and
that's
since they're already playing one dwarf, they have some more dwarves even on the side of Method NA. You know, they got 2 Night Elves with J.B and Shakib playing it, but everybody else playing that dwarf. It helps, you know, defensively and offensively to optimize damage.
So you're able to dispel Rix's dot with it. In addition to that, you're also able to dispel Samrek's fear. So that is 2 pretty good uses of that. Method NA is doing a pretty substantial pull here. Lighty dropping incredibly low.
Drops
pops his
very
shield wall.
low.
Still at 15% health. Gets the life cocoon. He's going to be okay. It looks like some explosives may go off here though.
Yeah, there are a lot of enemies in this pull here. They need to get through these laborers very quickly, or else there will be too many explosives that overwhelm them. Yeah, J.B, though, in Way the Crane, able to handle a couple explosives going off, as long as they don't all go off at the same time and one-shot everybody. Lighty gonna have to kite away here at 4% HP with that Necrotic stack on him.
Is that Lingering Psychic Shell? Is that what that is?
It refreshes. Yeah, that was a Lingering Psychic Shell on him. Lingering Psychic Shell, unfortunately, does get smaller with Necrotic as well.
Is that another shield wall? Okay, so he has his touch of the... I think he has touch of the Everlasting Major since he just popped shield wall again, right?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I don't want to spend any
Okay,
more
so he
time
has touch
talking
of the
about it and
Everlasting
get
Major.
memed.
I just checked.
That is the case. They are about to finish this pull here. Things are looking safe for Method NA.
Are
They
they?
only have 4 Peacekeepers left. Yeah, I think the pull, the dangerous part of the pull is now over. Provided Lighty doesn't do something stupid and get attacked by 4 Peacekeepers with Charge Claw up at once. He should be in good shape from here as they clean up the rest of this pull. And that was a really good refusal to concede too much MDI-sized pulls to an affix-like explosive. You know, can't be too scared there. You still have to pull a lot of enemies in order to time this dungeon at a high level.
Ethical? Weekly no levering this, doing 1 pack at a time?
Yeah, Ethical not far behind
I
in terms
respect
of
that,
percentage.
honestly. I respect the mess out of that. The beginning of this dungeon is so hard to do.
Well, Ethical isn't playing a Death Knight either, so Ethical has a little bit less incentive to fight a small pull and then a big pull, and a little bit more incentive to just fight 2 medium-sized pulls because they are not relying on that Demon or the Death Knight that scales quadratically with the number of targets and really cares about having those cooldowns available for a big pull. So I think that it kind of makes sense that we're seeing these different size pulls coming out of the teams. Ethical have fallen down behind by 6% now on enemy forces, but otherwise they are keeping up in positioning in the dungeon with Method and A, who are now doing, once again, a pretty large pull here.
Oh my.
4 Peacekeepers rolling in once again.
Wonka S.
Lighty wants some more. This time he does not have that cheat death available.
He does have
a
Dwarf
shield
Racial.
wall.
Yeah.
Does have Dwarf Racial, yeah, so he's probably planning to use that here as he does approach that 30th stack of Necrotic.
No, he's just gonna walk away later.
He's had enough. He's out of here, and that resets his Necrotic and preserves that Dwarf Racial for later. Great play coming out from Lighty. And they're just kiting this entire pull here. Shakib unloads a huge burst of damage onto this pack, but it's not enough to kill everything, so there are a lot of thugs now that are
thugs are
still
all
in
enraged.
this pull. Yeah, they don't... So it's not the raging active, right? But it is their own enrage
Yes.
that they cast on themselves. And that is something that makes them quite lethal. A few more charges will be coming out soon here. I have to try and finish off those thugs
They're doing a
as
good
quickly as
job.
possible.
Yeah, they're doing a really good job.
Yeah,
dealing
and
with
good job here
explosive.
of actually priority damage onto those Peacekeepers is looking good. Those Peacekeepers fairly low on health here already, even as some thugs remain alive. This pull is going quickly and efficiently for Method and A, and it is going to be worth a huge bounty of enemy forces. Ethical finished up with their pull already, but it was a little bit smaller as they only get to 32% after that. Method and A opening up a lead in terms of enemy forces that should help them out dramatically as this dungeon continues.
Something that is pretty low-key that Lighty has been doing is he's actually using that serpent statue and intervening it or charging to it in order to be able to reposition himself fairly quickly. So sometimes you can use players to intervene too. Sometimes you can just use objects. So he's really utilizing defensive intervene. Really good play by him from the side of Method and A.
Extremely strong, especially with Necrotic active. That's when you're going to start to see the tanks that can just minimize how often they get hit. That really starts to matter with this affix active.
Okay, so Method and A has pulled coin-operated Crowd Pummeler here with all of this trash pack, making sure that they do get good stops on the Hired Assassin. Rogues, Outlaw Rogues specifically, notoriously good at being able to get those stops on the Assassin's Toxic Blade and then stopping their Hail of Flechettes. Really nice. Beyond that, it's just Lighty being able to kite out the Peacekeeper on the Charged Claw, not taking too much damage from that, and then they need to rotate kicks on that Refreshment Vendor, stopping that Kaja Cola, and then kicking that Ice Spritzer whenever that comes out. Oh, Lip
Yeah,
is...
the Ice Spritzer channeling for a couple seconds on Lip there. That does bring him down fairly low, but they are alright. Do manage to live through it, and most of the enemies now dead, besides the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler and his little friend there, the Peacekeeper, with the same model, actually. They are kicking these bombs now into the Pummeler. Important to do that, although it is efficient to save that last kick for as late as possible, because then you extend the 2-stack into a 3-stack, and you get a little bit more total uptime of a damage increase on the boss.
Yeah, and I mean, some classes benefit greatly from that, more so than others. Fire Mage is not exactly the biggest benefit out of it, but something like a Demon Hunter, the extended duration of the 2 into the 3, a significant, substantial damage increase overall. For them.
Yeah, for a Fire Mage, it can even be a damage loss depending on when they've hit their combustion, but that's not something that we're seeing out of either of these teams. We might have seen it if we'd gone to the Motherload, or to the Workshop, but Method and A, of course, banned the Workshop, which is interesting, again, because they had the fastest time trial time.
Just didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, I think that they probably felt favored in Workshop, but more favored in Motherload, and so you want to ban the one in which you are the least favored, right? Even if you're still favored in that map.
I mean, Ethical has actually been doing a pretty good job. They're taking it like really slow and steady. They're not doing some insane pull overall, but it's pretty good. Method in A here. This is very dangerous. I will say very ambitious as well.
They are pulling a large amount of enemies with Explosive and Necrotic active, but J.B is spinning Crane Kicking with Way of the Crane up. And that is doing a lot of HPS as Lighty is getting out of there. Binding Shot is going to save all these mobs in place. They do have some rough casts that they do need to be careful of. And Lighty has unfortunately, one of those Rock Lances went through on him. That is going to cause him to die, and now Threat is going to start being sent around to all different members of Method and A. Probably a lot on Shakib, though, who is kiting for his life now.
Oh, an explosive goes off.
Starting to go off as well.
As long as Method and A doesn't full wipe here, everything's going to be okay. If they're able to recover with just one death on Lighty, this is really not that bad in the grand scheme of things. This pull, if it starts to go wrong, it can go catastrophically wrong very quickly just because of how the Earth Rager's cast ends up working, and then like the throw rocks from the rat people.
Yeah,
I don't know what they're
they
called.
start, you know, your tank goes down and everybody else is going to start going down as well often.
That's pretty fun.
But Method and A
yeah,
did a really good job there of their tank went down and they were able to still all stay alive at the end there. So heads up play from the other members of their group. Looks like they are indeed going to be skipping that spider obelisk and playing it with the last boss as they shroud up towards Azarok here, the second boss of the dungeon. They are at 71% on the enemy forces meter. Let's see if they pull some trash in with Azarok. You can see Shakib kind of looking over at that Taskmaster Aziri pack.
he's giving it the eyeball.
Ascari. Yeah, they're pulling. Okay, they're pulling one Stone Fury. They pulling anything more? Just one Stone Fury. That's all we need here today. One Stone Fury, please.
Please,
into
sir.
Azarok
Can you
here.
give me one Stone Fury? Thank you. Ethical taking this pull that we saw from Method and A and doing it with 2 less trash packs, so significantly easier for Skylark to be able to deal with overall.
Yeah, this pull is going to take them less time, but they're getting less count from it.
Yeah, it's just less efficient. I don't hate this. I think it makes reasonable sense, especially if Ethical hasn't done immense amounts of prep for something like a explosive necrotic motherload.
And this makes a lot of sense as well, given their composition, right? Double Hunter, really happy with the kind of medium-sized pulls pretty frequently,
Yep.
rather than the Death Knight, which really wants that huge pull that Method and A were able to pull off. I think Method and A is likely to be gaining a time advantage from this, but Ethical, given what they've chosen to play, I think are making some good decisions here and are putting themselves in position to win if something goes wrong for Method and A.
I think currently Method and A is about 2 minutes ahead, though, even still.
Yeah, Method and A has certainly been opening up a lead, but anything could happen in the later half of this dungeon.
Absolutely. You do see Ethical here. Skylark has a 50 stack of Necrotic. No Dwarf Racial active for him. The Ring of Peace does come out to be able to keep those mobs separated from him, not connecting and resetting his Necrotic. He's going to be A-okay. Method and A still dealing with Azarok. Avalanche should go down shortly here. They're pretty substantially ahead in terms of trash count.
Yeah, they're at 72% to Ethical's 67. Ethical looking at that obelisk here. Looks like they're going to be doing another trash pull here, so
Look at
this
the
should catch them up.
Okay.
Yeah, the extractor is going to allow them to get access to that obelisk, so presumably they're planning to do that obelisk. They don't have a shroud either, so yeah, they need the awakened portals to get from boss A to boss B, rather than Method and A, who has access to that shroud and can therefore get those dwarves through without needing to have them die.
What Ethical is saying with this is, like, effectively if they're playing a bunch of the obelisks, it's like, alright, we probably have an inferior strategy to Method and A. We're banking on them kind of making a mistake. So we just make sure that we keep playing our game and try to keep it clean. Arrow does end up going down. Skylark's sitting at a nice 6% health.
The Life Cocoon does come out, though, to save him at the end there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Ethical's strategy is slow, right? It's slower, but it is safer. But Method and A has perhaps had enough time to practice this more dangerous strategy and get it reliable, in which case that is going to be very, very difficult for Ethical to beat.
Absolutely. Method and A is playing like Lights Out currently, only having 1 death that was on Mighty on that pretty dangerous pull after coin-operated crowd pummeler. There's definitely no slouch of a pull, so they're going to be dealing with that. They are positioning themselves to be able to play the Blood of the Corruptor, like we were talking about in the pre-show. Probably not the most ideal mob to play with Mogul Razdunk.
Yeah, Blood of the Corruptor. So it looks like they're about to go into this obelisk. That makes a lot of sense. You're absolutely right. With Mogul Razdunk, there are a few spots in that fight where you really need to get to some specific areas in the room, and if those areas in the room are covered with that defiled ground, things get very bad very quickly. Blood of the Corruptor, one of the easiest awakened enemies to fight with a lot of end bosses, though, just not this one.
Yeah, if I had to create a Dratnos tier list for awakened mobs to fight with Mogul Razdunk, I would put Blood of the Corruptor solidly in the D tier.
Yeah, pretty bad, although definitely not impossible.
I would,
for a team that is
agree with that. Definitely
really trying to make it work.
Yeah, I think it's just not worth your time, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's and the risk-reward ratio is just so low, especially given that you want to skip this area anyways, and you want to play dwarves anyways, so you don't have a night elf skip.
Precisely.
So it's not costing them very much time, given that the alternative is also fairly slow of finding a different way to skip through this area.
There are a lot of ways to be able to skip through this area, but this one seems not. This is definitely the path of least resistance, I would say.
Now, Ethical have finally finished their trash pulls in this area. They are going to be going into the obelisk. They do have a little bit more count now than Method and A, but they are going to be not pulling the second boss until Method and A has started the third boss. That is a large lead being opened up on the side of Method and A
Yeah,
in the past few minutes.
I think Method and A may even have the opportunity to wipe once and probably still be hard chilling in terms of time.
Does depend on where they wipe. If they wipe in the final 10% of a boss fight, I think that would be enough for Ethical to close the gap. But anything else, yeah, you're right. I think Method and A are starting to get some safety here.
It's like you say, there are two types of motherloads whenever you're looking at how safe you are on time. Do you have enough time to wipe, or are you just kind of Monka S point right clocking it and about to just kind of squeeze
Yeah, that's the thing.
at the very end?
Especially back before Awakened, things used to go so wrong with like 5 minutes evaporating as you try and skip to that last boss. Yeah.
That was always a rough time. But Awakened now making Motherload, I would say substantially easier just in terms of consistency, dealing with just like the skips. I mean, having to ask people to death skip or do like weird meld skips and stuff like that, there's always a lot of room for error.
All right, Tettles, do you know which pipe is going to be the next one to activate here on Rix of Flux Flame?
So it starts off with a random pipe in the room, and then it goes counterclock. I had to put my hand up counterclockwise around the room.
That is correct. Well done, Tettles.
I think I told you that at some point.
Maybe I told you that at some point.
Maybe you told me that at some point.
Maybe we told each other.
I think that's.
I certainly learned it at some point. It may have been from you.
I learned it from Cry recently.
Okay, yeah, it's cool to see that though. Yeah, that means that the pipe that's in frame right now, just under J.B's unit frame, is going to be the next one to fire.
Yeah, it allows you to
super relevant.
position.
Might not even be something that Method and A is tracking, but it might be, as they might be moving to the side of the room that will therefore be safe.
Yeah.
You can see they're sort of moving over there.
It helps.
They
to
may well be
have
aware of it.
3 live key pushers on your team. Yoda, Shakib, and JB extensively push live keys, so it gives them a lot of different perspective as to how they maybe should be looking to pull some trash packs. It also just gives them extensive knowledge of how the mechanics of the dungeons end up working out, and it helps like create a route. Whereas on the side of Ethical, they don't really have like a ton of live key pushing experience. So sometimes it's going to be a little bit rougher around the edges, especially since they are starting out first week of the season. First time we've seen them.
This late into the expansion as well, with so much knowledge built up. You know, in the first MDI of an expansion, that kind of MDI history can be really valuable, the history of improvisation and doing these keys at this speed. But as the expansion goes on, really knowing these dungeons inside and out starts to be very valuable too.
I mean, the Ethical team is a lot of just MDI veterans. Like that's a lot of MDI experience. It's like a mixture of Free Marcy and Goldstratters. Not something to be really be messed with. Method and A, though, one of the most storied teams in MDI history.
Yeah, these guys have a history of winning here, and it has been impressive for Ethical to take even the one map off of against them so far. That was really remarkable to see in that Atal'Dazar. But the Motherload going a lot worse for them. Not over till it's over, but something is going to need to happen that is very bad for Method and A for them to have a chance in this, for Ethical to have a chance in this, rather.
I mean, winning the Atal'Dazar was actually a pretty big deal, even though this Motherload is probably going to be substantially slower.
All right, Lighty and crew making their way to the final obelisk here. They should have enough enemy forces without needing to pull anything else, so they're just going to pull Samrek, and then they will fight the boss with, I believe it's just going to be one awakened enemy, right? Just the spider. So actually, you were correct earlier, Tettles. You should have stuck to your guns. It's just going to be a one obelisk Mogul Razdunk here.
Dude, so on live keys, if anybody ever suggests doing an obelisk with Mogul Razdunk, I think they have 3 heads. I think that boss is really brutal to play a bunch of, like, any awakened mobs with, much less play 2 with.
Yeah, well, one thing in the Motherload as well is that the portals themselves are so useful.
Exactly.
Every single portal is placed somewhere that it lets you skip somewhere good, so it makes the cost of using these awakened... Yeah, exactly. Precisely. Indubitably.
Indubitably, yeah. Been hanging out together too much lately. Method is going to be downing Samrek, Beckoner of Chaos here, and now they just have Mogul Razdunk around with Voidweaver Mouth here to be able to deal with. They're probably going to pull Mogul Razdunk towards this entrance area, utilizing safe spots around the room. There's actually a bunch of safe spots in this room.
Yeah, it's because the room isn't quite flat, right? It's got a couple of small hills and stuff in it that catch those missiles.
It's like the lists. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they make a few safe spots throughout this dungeon so that if you're a live key pusher, you may be aware of where some of these are, and that allows you to fight this boss in those safe spots and use them. An alternative strategy that's generally a little bit safer is to just move the boss to whatever area is not going to be bombarded by those heads, and so you don't have to worry about making sure you're right in that safe spot.
So it's also important to note that if your ranged DPS is standing in the safe spot, they're probably not going to move for the Gatling gun as well. The Gatling gun is physical damage. Lighty drops
to
there.
1%.
Hello?
Light Cocoon, though, comes out on him.
Now everybody's getting sprayed down by the Gatling gun. This is, what did he get hit by? Did he get hit by just the boss ability, the mega...
I think that's just the boss's magic-based attack thing that it does every couple seconds.
Mega something.
Exactly, yeah, that one.
That one. The magic one that beats down your tank. I'm surprised he could drop so low from that.
Yeah, they may have had a Spell Reflect come out on something like a Thing from Beyond or a Spider cast that then caused him to not have it available for one of those magic-based attacks from Mogul Razdug.
Okay, good kill on the explosive. Yoda bringing out his Gat, shooting it from afar.
Yeah, that's good move there from Yoda. We've seen pistol shots against explosives being a good strategy. Ooh, Yoda moves out of the way, though, so J.B ends up taking that Azurite Heartseeker directly to the face.
You can parry the Heart... Can you parry the Heartseeker if it's not on you?
Yes, okay. Yeah, you can.
So a lot of the times you'll have the tanks jumping around like you saw Lighty do right there, trying to soak as many Heartseekers as possible. Alternatively, you can use stuff like Demon Hunters with Blade Dance or Blur, and then Rogues with Parry or Evasion. You
gotta be careful. If you're targeted by that thing and you vanish, it'll immediately shoot rather than stop casting. So I've seen many people be surprised to their death by that.
That is good insight, Dratnus. I would have never actually known that.
Yeah. All right, we see Method and A making their way now to the final bit of this boss fight. But one thing to note, they do not have all of the enemy forces count that
They're just going to run into a couple mines, I think, at the very end here.
Yeah, that is something that you can do. Each mine does give one count out of the few hundred that you need to finish this dungeon. So if they go, they can either kill like one goblin, or they can jump on something like 5 mines, maybe?
It's like, yeah, because 2%, I think this is like a 400 count dungeon, so like 4 or 5 mines probably would be enough. Kind of
something
weird
like
that they're 2% off, right?
Yeah, something may have gone wrong early. They may have just failed to pull one enemy. They may have failed to get a tag on a mech jockey that went into a peacekeeper earlier.
Also, that's probably the likely scenario if I really had to guess.
All right, and they are moving now into this pack.
Yeah,
it looks like they're just going to focus down one enemy rather than go and try and jump on as many mines as possible.
This pack
makes a lot of sense here. Yeah, but you'd have to get in combat with it anyways, and they decided it'll be more reliable and less likely that something goes horribly wrong for them to just focus down one Sky Scorcher, and when that Sky Scorcher dies, Method and A will be our winners.
All right.
Big shout out to the NA finalists and the champions.
Come on, a little more than that. Big shout out to our NA champions. Method NA taking their first victory of the season with an incredibly good setup throughout this grand finals. I mean, this is what we've